Thank you. Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Pensions Subcommittee and Board. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you can, in the hall, we can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. When referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. We have several important reports to consider today, and I anticipate and hope we'll deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. Sedrant apologies and approval of the members' remote participation. So, good to have the Sedrant apologies, Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. The sedent for the Pensions Subcommittee is we've got 7 members present in total, 4 members present in person at Council HQ, being the Chair, the Vice Chair, Councillor John Campbell, Councillor Archie Drybra, and 3 members present on Microsoft Teams, being Councillor Dorward, Councillor McGregor and Councillor McFarlane. Not present at the start of the meeting is Councillor Thompson. And for the Pension Board Chair, we've got 6 members present in total, 5 in person at Council HQ, being Councillor Barretti, Councillor Maureen Johnson, and Phil McGrogan, David Stainthorpe and Moira Weatherup, and 1 member present on Teams, being Councillor Walters. 1 apology from Helen Croney, and 1 member not present is Colin Graham. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, and give my approval for the remote participation of both the subcommittee and board. Do we have any declarations of interest from the subcommittee? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a declaration, it's just to let you know that I've got a funeral later on, but I'll stay as long as I can, and then I'll probably have to leave about 12:15, between 12:15 and 12:30.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Do you have any declaration of interest from the Pensions Board? No, thank you very much. So, minutes of the previous meeting of Pensions Subcommittee on 7th December. Do we have approval of the minutes? Thank you very much. Now move on to item 6, which is the 2023 actuarial valuation and the final result. This report provides members with an update on the final results of the triennial valuation of the fund. Members received a detailed presentation at the December meeting on the valuation process and whole fund results. All participating employers in the fund have now been involved in a consultation process regarding their own individual funding position and an employer contribution rate for the next 3 years. Following on from the valuation process, the funding strategy statement for the fund has been updated by Hymans Robertson, including an enhanced section on cessation arrangements. Richard Warden and Jamie Clark from Hymans Robertson are online to answer any questions members may have. Do we have any questions on this item? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was looking through the body of the report, and on page 14 at 4.5, where the council pool includes, and it gives you a few examples, the ex-regional council. It also mentions the Crichton Trust. If you go to the actual draft report on page 23, again it mentions where the contribution pools are, and it gives you a list of, Dumfries and Galloway Council, historic regional and district councils, etc., and also Scottish Police, Scottish Fire and Rescue, but there's no mention about Crichton Trust in there. I'm just looking for a bit of clarity, because usually when the likes of the Scottish Police and Scottish Fire and Rescue and various other things in the past no longer become part of the pension fund, you know, because it talks about cessation there. I'm just wondering, is it quite a lot of people in these sort of council pools that are left behind that still take from the pension fund, or will that eventually just disappear so that the police and the fire will look after their own pensioners? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Is anybody able to help us with that? Jamie, for example, Jamie Clark?
I don't know if Richard wants to answer this first, or...
Well, yeah, sorry, I don't have a list of every single employer in the pool, but I'm aware. I don't know if Ross might also, if Ross is in the room. I know he's been very close to this, and he's had discussions with various employers. I don't have a full list of them, but sort of from an actuarial perspective, one thing I would say before, sorry Ross, I can see you now on the camera, but before I go on, I suppose we've got the council pool. It's got its own separate pot of assets and liabilities in the fund, and the police has got their own, and the fire have got their own as well, so we calculate separate rates for them. I know that, but the council pool contains a number of different bodies there. But Ross, you're maybe closer to it, you can maybe add a bit of flavour to the bodies that are in the pool, perhaps.
You clearly asked a very good question there, Councillor Campbell.
It's put everybody on the spot, Chair.
Karen, could you give us some clarity on that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and as Richard's outlined, police and fire have got their own sort of pool, so it's not it is part of the council pool, and it is mainly the sort of ex-regional councils, basically kind of active bodies. But the Crichton Trust is included in the pool, along with, I think, is it Amy, and right off the top of my head, a couple of other sort of really small employers where it's probably more sort of affordable for them as well to be included within the council, and because of their close links previously and currently, like with the council, that they're included within the pool. It gives them that extra sort of level of sort of protection, and then they're not needing to get their own like valuations done, and it gives them a wee bit more stability with their employer rates as well. So there isn't the council by far and away is the biggest the biggest employer. It was just like a couple of small employers that are linked with the council. It just makes more sense to kind of to link them in with the council contribution rates rather than doing them separately. So it is a bit more of a historical position, but that's hopefully gives you some clarity that there's not a huge number of employers in the council pool.
I think part of the question as well from Councillor Campbell was, as time goes on, do these organisations drop off, and how much, I suppose, how much is being withdrawn from the pension fund? Is that part of the question?
And as I did, probably like a lot of the employers in the pool are sort of in actually like the ex-regional council, so there will still be members drawing pension, although they've not got any actives, and like that is just absorbed within the overall kind of council funding position. So yeah, there will be an element of that, but as I said, the general, we've got a good sort of funding position to fund the future pensions.
Yeah, I think probably the other point is that once these bodies are separate from the council, quite often they have closed status, so they don't take on new employees into the funds. So just as you've kind of suggested in your question, what happens there is that it's only those employers at the time of transfer that would continue to have pensions liabilities in relation to. So as time goes on, they will indeed come out in terms of it will reduce until there's no longer a liability beyond a certain period. But that could be a number of years into the future, obviously.
Yep, thanks very much for the clarity. I think that's much appreciated, and I'll make sure that my second question will be a little bit easier.
Councillor Driver.
It's a similar point here. You may remember a couple of years ago, Wheatley Group, or DGHP as it was at the time, transferred to Strathclyde Pension Fund. And it's regard those members of DGHP who transferred from Dumfries and Galloway Council in 2004 or whatever it was when they became that housing. those liabilities, are they left with Dumfries and Galloway if the pension, or were they taken on by Strathclyde?
They were taken on by the Strathclyde Fund. At the time of the transfer, we transferred over a portion of the assets of the Council Pension Fund, or the Dumfries and Galloway Pension Fund, to the Strathclyde Fund to accommodate that. So that effectively ends our relationship with that group of staff, and they are now covered through the Strathclyde arrangements.
David Stainthorpe.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking for a wee bit of comfort or information on the employer contribution rate differences across the employers. The members of the fund, the people that will become pensioners in the future who are in the council pool are protected from these changes the way it's been progressed. But the people out with the council pool aren't protected from these changes. And one of the changes, the Barony College change, is a 30% reduction in the contribution rate. Now, because it's a career average scheme, that makes a huge difference to the pension that these folks are going to get in the end of the day. And I'm just wondering why we're, in the council pool, there's a reduction of 4 or 5% per year, yet in the Baronies, as an employer, their reduction is substantially different. I'm not entirely clear why there should be a difference across the different rates.
Thanks, David. That was a set of figures that leapt out to me as well when you looked through it, and why there was such a disparity between them. Richard, can you help us with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just first point is that whatever the employers pay into the fund, whether that's gone down or up, that doesn't affect the benefit entitlements of the members. So it's really important the members get what we get. So this is all about how it's funded by the sponsor. So entitlements are LGPS benefits, care, there's some final salary in there. So it's just that there's no link to what the members get here at all. So that's just maybe just one point. Bear in mind, it doesn't affect the members at all. They'll get what they're entitled to. So that's a kind of very important point in the LGPS. Not so much in the private sector, incidentally. Sometimes that can affect private sector funds, what employers pay, and if they become insolvent, not an issue in the LGPS. In terms of the rates, so we've got the stability mechanism. We talked about the training in December, and it's in the paper, and that's a council pool only, and that restricts the way in which the rates can change over time. So kind of there's a corridor, if you like, of rate changes, and they can go up or down over time, and that's because they've got a really long-term time horizon. Barony College, while we probably still do have a long-term time horizon, we don't stabilise them in the same way. So when we're kind of in the good times of funding, so when we've got a good funding position, which is the case of this valuation, they might see a stronger reduction or a bigger reduction than perhaps the council might see. But equally, that can flip if we kind of go into the worst times. You know, if the funding position deteriorates, the rate will go up a bit. There's a bit of stability there by we still got a very long time horizon from a funding perspective, so that helps to stabilise the rates to an extent. But the rates that are in the report are very much based on the funding position of the individual employers. So some will be better than 122%, some will be worse. So that's reflected in the way in which the rates work, and also the funding time horizon. So some employers have got shorter time horizons, so that makes the rate a bit more volatile because you're spreading surplus or deficit, whatever, over a shorter time horizon. So it's very much dependent on, beyond the council pool, how their funding position looks, the makeup of their membership, how mature the membership is. So there's a few factors that are feeding into the way in which the rates change. But maybe the key point is it doesn't affect at all the members' entitlements. The people, the pensioners, the actives and deferrers, they're entitled to get exactly what we should get under the regulations.
Thank you, Richard. Does that reassure you, David? Because I think your main concern was about potential benefits in the future.
Yeah, thanks. I'm still a little bit confused there because my understanding was that the system now is that you get whatever contributions you put in each year ring-fenced, and that goes forward into your pension pot in the future.
Just for voice of doubt, so that the members pay member employee contributions, which depend on their earnings. So the more you earn, the bigger amount you pay. So that goes into their pot, into that employer pot. But the liability, the benefits are absolutely 100% secure for members. So regardless of what we're paying in, these benefits, the care benefits going forward, and whatever they've accrued in the past are 100% payable. It's a statutory guarantee. And so it's this employer, in the good times, the employer pays less to meet those benefits. And the bad times, when the economy is not as good and the funding position is worse, the employers will be basically they pay a balance of cost. They'll pay more to make sure that those benefits are paid. But just, it absolutely doesn't. They're 100% guaranteed to members here. So regardless what happens to that employer, they'll get that money. The members will get what they're entitled to under the LGKS regulations.
So in effect, the benefits are guaranteed when people retire, and it's just a matter of setting the rates to make sure that it's funded on an ongoing basis. But regardless of that, the benefits will still remain the same. Okay, thank you. Have we any further questions? Linda?
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. One is in relation to 4.5 on page 14, where we're talking about the stabilisation rate. So it's set at, the stabilisation rate can go up by 0.5% a year for the council pool, but it can decrease by 1%. So am I correct in thinking with what's proposed in this paper for the council pool, it will go down 1% for the next 3 years? Will it take 6 years to recover that because we can only put the stabilisation up by 0.5% each year?
I'm happy to take that one. Yes, you're spot on what you said there, and that's based. One thing I should say is those parameters have been in place for a few years now, but at each valuation, the fund reserves the right to check if those parameters are still okay to apply over a longer term based on the modelling we do at each valuation. Now, as it happens, it's been robust and it's stood the test of time since the stabilisation mechanism came in. So what you're saying is absolutely right based on the current parameters. But the fund might tweak those parameters over time if it needs to. You know, so there's some huge crash at the next valuation, the funding level's gone away down, perhaps they might think, well, 0.5%'s not enough. We might need to tweak it to, 0.75% or some other number. But yes, what you said is right. And it's actually a really important point about pension funding for long-term employers, where if rates go down, it's quite hard to get them to go back up. It takes a lot of effort because employers have got budgets. Times are tough, there's not a lot of money circulating. So part of the balancing act here at the valuation is not to sort of, bring rates down so heavily that it'll take ages to get them back up again. So it's trying to get that kind of stability in. But your comments are spot on about how it works currently. Yeah.
Paul, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just to reinforce the point that Richard made, I think the other point to kind of highlight is that in terms of reducing the contribution rate here, we're doing that to recognise the current surplus in the fund, the extent to which the valuation of the assets exceeds the valuation of the liabilities. There's no expectation at the end of the 3-year period that there'll be any need to increase the contribution level from employers. What we've tried to do is try to bring it down in a measured way, which means that it's likely to match the ongoing funding requirement in terms of contribution levels. That may change, but it's based on a prudent set of assumptions at the minute, and we've certainly been taking into account the advice from the actuaries. We've been more measured in terms of the reductions that we've applied to the contribution rates through this process than some other funds. So we've really done that to try and protect the fund going forward, to try and ensure that there's not a need at the end of the 3-year period to see contribution rates increase to try and compensate for that.
So just in relation to that then, when would the fund change that stabilisation rate? Which meeting would that be at? Like today's meeting, that could be decided if the fund did decide they wanted to change that stabilisation rate, or when does that happen? Or
I think we would monitor this in terms of when we felt there was a need to revisit the stabilisation mechanism. It's not something that we'd anticipate, adjusting on a regular basis, really there to try and maintain a long-term stability for employers, so that that there's a kind of, they know in advance for planning purposes the parameters they're likely to be operating within. But if there was some substantial change that required a review of the approach, we would look at it at that stage. But it's not something we keep an eye on it at each valuation level, but it's not something we anticipate changing on a regular basis at all.
David?
We've got a plan here to make reductions over a 3-year period. If there was to be, say, a big change in the investment's value in year 1 or 2, is there an option to revisit this, or is it absolutely fixed in stone?
What we're reflecting here is the firm intention to set the contribution rates over a period. I mean, I think we know that valuation levels are likely to vary in the interim period between now and the next triennial valuation, but we're not anticipating a need to revisit the contribution rates reflected in this report until the end of that period, and it would be very, very exceptional circumstances which would allow that to be something we'd look at.
It's worth saying as well, just to add to that, Paul, that we stress test the mechanism against market falls in the future as well as market gains. So it's kind of, the rates are meant to sort of withstand market movements. If it's really extreme, of course, that would be different. I suspect SPP or somebody would reach out to funds and say, conditions are so bad you might want to revisit rates, but it's very rare for it to happen, very rare.
So just as much as anything else for David and for myself, so how would that manifest itself? I'm presuming we would bring something to a future meeting if there was such a development. Is that the way it would operate?
That's my understanding. As I say, I've been working in LGPS for a long time. It's never yet happened. Even the credit crunch, the financial crisis, it didn't trigger. There was talk about, do we need to do something across, cross funds, and that didn't. So even something as drastic as that. But I guess what would be a lot of the Scheme Advisory Board, the national one, would get involved. I guess SPA would get involved. We would absolutely, be bringing it along to committee. But what do we do then? How do we change the rates? What does this mean? And we'd probably do a bit of modelling at the time, but it is very rare for that to happen. But that would be the process. But as Paul says, the expectation here is that the rates you're seeing in the valuation report will stand for the next 3 years.
Are we any further questions? Moina?
Thank you. On page 40, we have a table, and if I'm understanding it correctly, it looks as if one of the underlying assumptions in the Hymans-Robertson Economic Scenario Service shows that inflation isn't going to normalise in 40 years. So if the Bank of England set an inflation target at 2%, is that correct? And what are the implications on the fund if those are the assumptions that we're using?
Maybe just to pick up, so that table, so we do this thing, you might recall from training, we call it this risk-based approach, and we kind of, we model future scenarios, including future inflation, 5,000 times across different time horizons. And what the assumption, it might be what you're saying, so I think that table's got sort of 10, 20-year and 40-year horizons, and that's kind of what you're seeing is the kind of percentiles, different. So you've got 50%, that's sort of best estimate over a period and so on and so forth. And that's kind of an average over the whole period you're seeing there. And so you probably know, you'd be well aware of the fact inflation is still fairly high, or like 2023, it's kind of higher now, but it's expected to trend. So that the overall assumption, albeit there's volatility around it, it's expected to trend towards the Bank of England target over the next 20 years, being the 2%. But when you express that as a number, and you average it out, you get a number that's slightly higher, if that makes sense. So if it's trending towards 2%, you don't see 2%. Over 40 years, you maybe see a bit above 2% on a best estimate basis. When you look at the different percentiles, and it shows what the higher and lower boundaries might be based at different percentiles, if that makes sense.
I suppose that begs the question, when Moira said that inflation is not going to be normalised, what is normal for inflation?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. It's just, I mean, I suppose the Bank of England, you know, is the kind of thing that most people say that's the normal, but it hasn't been exactly the, you know, the normal for some time. So, but there is a kind of long-term loan. I guess you would have to say it's 2% for CPI if that's what the economy's targeting. Ultimately, we're trying to get to that.
Can I just check then, when we're looking at that table, when it's saying like there's an 84 percentile chance that in the next 10 years it's going to be 4.1%, that model's assuming that there's a higher chance that inflation is going to be high in the next 10 years than being near the 2.3% that's being used as part of this valuation.
Yeah. Yes, so that's saying that 84% is kind of saying there's a 1 in 6 chance it will be as high as that. On the upside, on the kind of high end, equally will be a 1 in 6 chance that it could be quite a bit lower than 2.3. So a 50-50 chance, if you want to call it that, is 2.3. But it could be less, could be more. I think that the model doesn't kind of say, it's not got a belief that it's going to be high or low. It's just stress testing it. It's kind of saying, you know, if you kind of set up a distribution of outcomes in inflation, it could be quite high, a 1 in 6 probability, or it could be lower than 2.3, or a 1 in 6 probability on the kind of 16% percentile, which is the downside one. So it's kind of just looking at inflation 5,000 times and building it into scenarios, some of which will lead to higher inflation and some will lead to lower. So it's kind of, that's the way you kind of read that table reads. It's just trying to show the distribution of possible inflation outcomes over the time horizon.
And that is the basis of the assumptions you made for the valuation as well. So that's how it operates.
That's right. Correct. The rates you see in these papers are the outcome of stress testing rates in an environment where some outcomes might be high, some outcomes might be low. We're trying to steer a contribution rate through that volatility to say we recognise things are volatile. Might be some high, might be some low outcomes, but we've got a confidence that is a 75% confidence that rate will be enough to cover all this volatility. And it's not just inflation, obviously. You know, it's investment returns and other things that feature in the evaluation of our assumptions.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions, Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. It's just on the back of what Moira was asking about the mechanism over 3 years, you know, the reduction of 1%. Now, are we actually agreeing to that? Because 4.7 says these rates are required to be agreed with the actuary prior to the valuation being signed off by the 31st. And if that's the case, should that not have been in the recommendations? Because the recommendations just says review and comment, and 2.2 says note the proposed, etc., you know. So I'm just wondering, should that be an actual recommendation? Thank you, Chair.
No, I think it's an important point that it's not a committee decision in terms of the contribution rates going forward. It's based on the professional advice of the actuary. The actuary does liaise with officers in relation to that advice, so that's what that paragraph 4.7 is referring to. But I think in terms of making sure there's kind of protection there, the convention is that it's the professional advice of the actuary in terms of what's required, rather than a committee decision in terms of what the rate should be going forward.
Thank you. On that basis, then we'll just move on to the recommendations. So we'll ask one to review and David.
Thank you. It's not really an investment question, but it's just a point of interest. Was this windfall that the council's going to get because of this change actually anticipated and included in its recent budget, or is this something that's possibly given a better? It was included already, right? Okay, thank you.
Yes, no, the exact approach that's reflected in this report, David, that's exactly the approach reflected in the council's agreed budget last week.
Thank you. So we'll move to the recommendations. Review and comment on the draft funding strategy statement, Appendix 1 of this report. So happily we've done that. And 2, note the proposed employer contributions and the draft funding strategy statement has been circulated to scheme employers for agreement prior to the valuation being signed off by 31st March 2024. So we're happy to note that. Item 7, this report provides members, this is the external audit plan for 23-24. This report provides members with information in relation to the pension fund audit for financial year 2023 to 24. Peter Lindsay and Amy MacDonald from Audit Scotland are here to provide a brief overview of their plan. We'll move over to you.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Good morning, everybody. As you'll have seen, the report is our 23-24 annual audit plan, and this essentially just sets out the overall audit approach for the year, any planned audit work in response to the risks identified. And this is our second year of our audit appointment, so you'll see that the approach is very similar to last year's approach, but what I'll do is just highlight a few of the key areas in the report for you this morning. So at page 3 of our report, which is 57 of the packs, that kind of sets out a summary of that planned audit work and also details the auditor's responsibilities as well as the responsibilities of the fund. And at paragraph 11, as part of that, we do ask the pension subcommittee members to communicate to us any knowledge of any actual suspected or alleged fraud that they're aware of in 23-24 that would be required to be brought to our attention. At page 5 in Exhibit 1, this details our materiality thresholds. I'll say that's page 59 of your packs. I realise there's different pages there. But page 59 of the packs, Exhibit 1, that's our materiality threshold. So materiality is essentially the level that we set that we would consider the accounts to be materially misstated. And we also report there our reporting threshold, and that's the level at which we would report any unadjusted errors within the accounts to yourselves. At paragraph 15 on page 60 of the pack, page 60 of the pack, this also just highlights that we set a separate lower materiality threshold for pension contributions and pension benefit payments, and that's just to reflect the importance of those amounts within the accounts, but that they are significantly lower than the investment values within the accounts. At Exhibit 2, that details our significant risks of material misstatement that we've identified as part of planning work, and there are two risks in that exhibit. The first one relates to management override of controls. That isn't a specific risk to the fund, it's a risk that we reflect across all of our annual audit plans across public sector bodies, and that's as a result of ISA 240, which requires us to reflect on that risk, essentially due to management's unique ability and position to override controls. So we're unable to rebut that, but what we do is have a number of audit procedures in place that we perform to get assurances over that risk, and that's detailed in the planned audit response section of the exhibit. The second risk there relates to the estimation of level 3 investments, and that just reflects the subjectivity of the measurement of those investments and the fact that the valuation is based on data which is not observable on the market. And again, you'll see our planned audit responses there within the paper. Further, at paragraph 21 on page 62 of your pack, this kind of is what we reflect on as our other areas of audit focus. So it's not areas that we've identified any significant risks, but it's areas that we think require specific attention and specific audit work. And that's the valuation of level 2 investments and the actuarial valuation of future retirement benefits. And that includes the impact of the triennial valuation at 31st of March 23. At page 63, we've detailed our approach to wider scope and any wider scope risks identified. Under the Code of Audit Practice, we're required to perform a full wider scope audit for the fund. So that just means that all of the areas in paragraph 25 we will look at and cover as part of our audit work. You'll note that we've not identified any specific wider scope risks for the fund in 23-24, but from our 22-23 annual audit report that we brought to you last year, there were a number of wider scope recommendations, and so we'll follow up on the progress against those as part of the 23-24 process. And finally, at Exhibit 3 on page 64 and Exhibit 4 on page 65, we've detailed out the key dates of the audit outputs and the annual accounts timetable as agreed by management. And that just confirms that based on those discussions with the management and based on those dates, the intention is to meet the statutory deadlines for the annual accounts and audit process. So that is all I wanted to highlight to you this morning, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Monica?
I just wonder if you can give us a bit more information about the difference between level 2 and level 3 investments, please.
Yes, I'll try. So level 2 and level 3 investments are basically the level at which investments are valued, and Ross and Hymans will know all about this, but essentially it's based on the type of data and how it's observable and what you can agree it to from external confirmation. So for the pension fund in Dumfries, we are actually able to agree the level 2 investment valuations to external market confirmation. So we don't see it as risky, whereas we can agree level 3 investment valuations to external data. So we have to do other audit procedures and speaking to fund managers, looking at wider market context, looking at the wider scope environment in order to get additional assurances over those valuations.
Thank you. Perhaps a question for later in the meeting, just in relation to the risks associated with those level 3 investments and the concerns that you've raised and whether we're getting return for our investment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? Councillor Driver?
It's not so much a question about the recommendation itself, Chair. I mean, most of these things we get at pensions are to note. I'm just wondering if we note and agree the Dumfries and Galloway Council Pension Fund external audit, because noting is fine, but agreeing that not only do we have to deliver, but the audit team have to deliver as well.
Yeah, I think that's actually quite a good point, Archie, to be honest. And the audit plan, from my reading of it, is, I've got to say, is very robust. You know, and I've been quite impressed with the service that we've had from Audit Scotland throughout the whole process, and I think it has ramped it up a bit from the previous audit regime that we had. And I think I don't know if you would agree with that, Archie, but it does seem to have. It's been quite good. So, is there any further questions on this? Thank you, Philip.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm just looking for a wee bit of clarification on page 62, just on, it's the paragraph that said, it's item 21 on page 62. It says, as part of our assessment of audit risks, we have identified other areas where we consider there are also risks. And I didn't know what that meant. Material misstatement to the financial statements. Are we talking typos?
So material misstatement is essentially what we would consider there to be a significant error within the accounts that would impact our opinion on the level of assurance we could give over those accounts. So these have been identified as areas of risk of material misstatement. That's not to say the accounts are misstated as a result, but due to the values within the accounts based on these and the estimation, there's a higher risk that they can be materially misstated. And so that's why we do additional testing and focus work over those areas to get the additional assurance that the accounts are not misstated as a result of these.
Sorry, Chair. So is that to say they didn't find any when you were doing the audit?
Last year, no.
Just to kind of broaden it out a wee bit, what actually, why is this a higher risk of misstatement, for example?
The level 2 investments, they're a higher risk of material misstatement due to their value and due to the nature of their valuation and how they are valued. So I think if you look at your, I don't know if you'll have the accounts today, but normally you have the accounts that details out very specifically what each of the factors that go into the level 1, level 2, level 3 valuations are. So level 1 is the least risky. You can get it from observable market data, but there's other factors that go into level 2 that doesn't always tie in that way, and so that's why they're slightly higher risk.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions on the audit plan? Nope. So we'll just move on to the recommendation. We're asked to note the Dumfries and Galloway Council Pension Fund External Audit Plan and note and agree. I think will we accept that? Thank you very much. So now we move on to item 8, which is a pension fund update and emerging issues. This standing agenda item provides an update to members on the current and emerging issues relevant to the pension fund. This report highlights the progress being made on the implementation of the fund's updated investment strategy since the last meeting of this subcommittee and board. The paper also provides an update of the work carried out to date by the Short Life Working Group on the committee and board governance review. There is also a brief overview of upcoming regulatory changes that will have an impact on the fund. Karen Donaldson is here to ask any questions any members may have. So open to questions. No. Nope. So if we have no questions on that, we're asked to note the updates in relation to the implementation of the agreed investment strategy as detailed at paragraph 4.1 to 4.6. 2.2, the update in relation to the pension subcommittee and board governance review is detailed at paragraph 4.7 to 4.10. And 3, to note the current and emerging issues that will impact the pension fund is detailed at paragraphs 4.11 to 4.17. And 2.4, that further updates on these issues will be brought to future meetings of this subcommittee and board as required. Are we happy to note those? Thank you. Item 9, annual training plan. This is a standing item on the agenda and details the final 2023-2024 training plan. All members of this subcommittee and board have been issued with a knowledge and skills questionnaire. Members are asked to complete this questionnaire by Friday the 15th of March. Officers will use the results to inform the 2024-25 training plan, which will be brought to the next meeting in June. Ross Fraser is here to answer any questions members may have. Do you have any questions on the training plan? Other than, why was the questionnaire so long? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies for being a little bit late. Yeah, it was just in terms of the training programme there, there's a new software system, I think, that's going to be for online learning across the council. Will this be included in that? I know it's quite specific to this subcommittee, but it's just so that there's a consistent platform where members can review their training and get access to the relevant materials should they need to. So it's just to see if this is going to get mainstreamed into that. Thank you.
Is the training plan going to be on that?
There's no work being done on that to date. I know that obviously the training platform is very new, so we've not been approached about the pension fund. It has always been done separately to other council training, but it's certainly something we can look at to make sure members have got everything in one place. But certainly there's not been any work done on that to date. But it's something we can definitely ask about and look into.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, I mean, I would think instinct says it's probably better to have all our training things in the one place, unless there's a good reason not to. I'm not sure there is, but unless it's just a custom and practice thing. And the other thing is, I'm just conscious as well that there's a number of vacancies still in the pension sub 3, which is, a bit of a chunk of, would probably be quorate with 3 members, you know what I mean? So I'm just sort of thinking, is there attempts to sort of establish that and which groups are still to fill those places? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm aware of the fact that we do have 3 members short on us. I know when speaking to other members, a lot of people are quite apprehensive about the pension subcommittee. They see it as quite a big responsibility. I do try to reassure people that it's that we're well advised. But Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is currently getting looked at through the Business Bureau. We've took information there on the vacancies, and we've asked each group to come back on suggestions of how we fill those, whether we bring it back to committee and change the number that each group's entitled to by confirming which groups don't want to fill their places. So it is currently getting looked at in the background. It'll be up at the next Business Bureau, and then you should see a report hopefully coming forward to full council in the future.
Is there any further questions on the training plan? Councillor Beretti.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a reflection. The board had one of its meetings 2 days ago on Tuesday, and it did actually show how much we were needing training and more flexible modules of training. There was a consensus that being in person did help quite dramatically. So we're looking at hoping that this continues, and we may actually need to look at how we meet ourselves and how that is then structured so to allow the board to actually work towards what the board is actually supposed to do. So that's just a reflection.
Thank you, Councillor Beretti. Is there any further questions? No. Moira?
Thank you. It was just in relation to the training from the Scottish Pension Liaison Group. We did touch on this at the Pension Board meeting on Tuesday, but it was just to see what training they can offer and when, because it hasn't. We haven't had dates for this year.
Does anyone have any dates for that training?
Yeah, I think as I said at the board on Tuesday, it is something that was discussed. There was an officer meeting of all the pension funds a couple of weeks ago, and that was very much at the forefront of that agenda. So we had agreed items to be taken forward over the next year, and I think the hope was that that will be arranged for in person, and I think it's normally sort of September, October time is when it's normally delivered. So hopefully we should have more information on that to inform the training plan that comes forward in June.
That's Karen. I think it would be useful to get some indication of when training is, reasonably far in advance, because we've all got, diary commitments, and having things just sprung upon us at the last minute doesn't actually necessarily make it feasible for people to take part in these things. So I would advise sooner rather than later if we can share the information. Councillor Beretti.
I think one of the things with so many new board members and looking forward in the years, my personal view was that we don't want to find ourselves in a position going forward 2, 3, 4 years where some of us may have to change, but we need to have a cohort of people who really do understand as best they can, that they can then give that information out to the new members. And that isn't going to happen over the space of 6 months, nor is it going to happen over the space of a year. It's going to take a lot longer. So this is going to have to be an ongoing moving feast, if you want. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on that? Nope. So we'll just move to the recommendations. We're asked to note 2.1, note the final record of training and training plan for 2023-24 as in the appendix. Note that 2.2, that skills and knowledge questionnaire has been circulated to members of the subcommittee and board to inform the training plan for 2022-25. And at 2.3, note that a new record of training and training plan for 24-25 will be brought to the next meeting of this subcommittee and board. Now, we move on to any other business deemed urgent by the chair and for need for a decision, but I don't have any. So we'll now move on to item 11, which is the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Consider the adoption of a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A(4) and paragraph 6 of part 1 of schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Are we happy to do that? Thank you.